Governor Edwards met me in the back of the DOTD building. I drove an electric vehicle around the grounds, and he drove a container mover, basically. It's a truck that pulls a fully loaded container, and it's 100% electric. And so he got to experience that. And with electric vehicles, they're quieter. They actually have immediate speed. His vehicle only went 18 miles per hour, and I drove behind him just in case. But it was an exciting day for him to experience these. We've driven electric vehicles, but nothing heavy duty, nothing this sturdy, nothing this powerful, and it's a really neat opportunity to see where the future of government service and mobility is going, and it's pretty exciting.
I had this idea at one point that electric vehicles would all drive like a golf cart, that they would be light and sort of flimsy, and so that is absolutely not the case. These are obviously substantial, and they're sturdy, they're smooth. The fact that they don't have a transmission means that you have the opportunity to accelerate right away in a very smooth way. That's impressive. The fact that there's no engine noise is also something. But when you think, so the truck that I drove, one of the common applications will be at a manufacturing facility or a port to move trailers around. Well, typically those vehicles sit there and idle all day, and if they're an internal combustion engine, the whole time that happens, you're having fumes being emitted. So it's not just about climate change, it's about what all the operators and others are going to be breathing. And so these are just a much better alternative, and I think they're going to be cheaper alternatives going forward. And then the application of this, whether it's with school buses or the regular vehicles as well, cars and trucks. I'm excited about this, and I can tell people that if they haven't had an opportunity to drive an electric vehicle yet, it is a very great experience.
Today we're doing an expo in association with Louisiana Clean Fuels and the Department of Transportation and Development. We brought some heavy-duty electric vehicle equipment, everything from buses to vans to container haulers to diesel trucks or 18-wheeler trucks, but they're electric. All of these are 100% electric vehicles that can be used in the daily routine of business. Dump trucks, things that you see every day, and just a much more efficient, a much more cleaner, a much more sustainable way of moving people and things for the purposes of government. So we're excited to do this exhibition today for folks to come and learn what their fleets could potentially be like. Good morning. I'm Sean Wilson, Secretary for the Department of Transportation and Development, and we're excited to welcome you to our headquarters for this expo on heavy-duty electric vehicles. As we said, we're excited to be here, and we want you to understand and appreciate that here at headquarters and all across the DOTD family, we're doing our part to reduce carbon emissions in order to provide a more sustainable future for generations to come. It is a goal that our climate action plan that the governor has led to have Louisiana become net zero by 2050. One of the things I'm most proud of is I traveled the country as AASHTO president and as your secretary of DOTD. We're one of the few states and the only state that I understand in the Southeast to have adopted such a plan. So we appreciate the governor's leadership as well as the entire industry of folks engaged in this topic. Within the scope of that climate action plan that was recently adopted, our first task is to achieve 26 to 28% of the 2005 greenhouse gas emission levels by 2025. So that means we have some work to do sooner rather than later. Now, in order to achieve these climate goals, we have to, as I said, reduce these greenhouse gas emissions to limit the impacts of climate change that harm our state, while adapting to maintain Louisiana's leadership position as a world leader in energy, industry, agriculture, and yes, I do believe transportation. The Biden administration has recognized the transportation needs across this country, and they've launched several investment programs to assist all DOTs, including Louisiana. You've heard us talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA. You've heard us talk about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is also the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It was passed by Congress in 2021. That bill will allocate $73 million in federal funding over the next 5 years to go towards electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Louisiana, with this year's investment being $10 million. However, these federal funds will require additional match, and we are working hard, and the governor has done an exceptional job of ensuring that match is never a challenge for us under his leadership. In order to bridge this gap in funding, DOTD is also committed to working with our private sector to convert gas stations into fuel stations where a variety of fuel types are available. And we intend to accomplish this through a grant program, and Dr. Eric Calavoda is leading that effort for us here in the state of Louisiana, along with Louisiana Clean Fuels, who is going to be supporting us in our efforts to deploy these resources. DOTD is also developing a separate alternative fuel vehicle infrastructure grant program. So this will allow us to do everything from natural gas to hydrogen, additional EV, and even propane fueling stations using our private sector partners. We hope to develop a grant program and solicit applications over the next year once our official plan is submitted in advance of the August deadline. And in the second year, we will be making awards, monitoring and inspecting installations, and identifying and correcting any weaknesses in such a grant program for use in future rounds and solicitations. We realize this is the beginning of a transition and really not the end, so we're excited about how we're going to make that happen. Most importantly, I'm happy to announce today that one of those charging stations or facilities will be right here on DOTD property. We're going to practice what we preach. We've done bike share, and you have the opportunity for bicycles. We talk about pedestrians, and we've identified a walking track around here, and we're talking about EV charging. And so we will provide an EV charging facility in front of the building that the general public will use, and for the department employees who choose to drive an electric vehicle, including your secretary, if I could get a Rivian. I will be charging my vehicle when we park in the back. So we're excited to be able to present that opportunity to you. I'd like to tell you that the vehicles displayed here, even the one the governor drove, I was happy to be behind him, are a few examples of the fleets and how we can convert fleets in the state of Louisiana to electric vehicles using state activities and dollars. We will have to explore hybrid options because it absolutely makes sense for some of our vehicles, but not all of them to be reliant on just EV. So we will have a hybrid approach at DOTD to ensure functionality is not disrupted. So we'd urge everyone to take a look, spend some time while you're here visiting our friends who brought their equipment, to experience them, to see how they operate, to realize the quietness of that drive. And so we also encourage you to consider this in your personal lives in terms of what this will mean for our economy. We see it happening in the private sector. There are a couple of folks that I'd like to thank before we invite the governor. Ann Vail, who's the executive director of Louisiana Clean Fuels. We appreciate your leadership. And then we have Roger Gingles and Vivian Johnson are here representing Dr. Chuck Brown at DEQ, who has been a partner of ours since 2016 when we first rolled out our alternative fuel corridor here in the state of Louisiana. So we're excited to have all of our guests with us today and all of the participants who brought their equipment. I'd like to now invite my boss, our governor, who's provided leadership on a number of issues regarding the future of Louisiana and how we can develop, Governor John Bell Edwards.
Thank you, Sean. What a beautiful day to come out and drive an electric vehicle. You know, they don't let me drive much, so that's why Sean said he wanted to be behind me. But it's a great morning, and I think we're going to have a great afternoon for the first Easter egg hunt in 3 years at the governor's mansion. And we're excited about that too. And that's because we're doing so much better with respect to COVID. And speaking of progress, we are making progress as a state on our state climate action plan. And we're going to make sure that we take full advantage of all the opportunities that we have in front of us to transition to cleaner energy so that we can address climate change. There's no state in the nation more affected by climate change than Louisiana. And you see it with sea level rise, you see it with the increasing frequency and severity of storms, and we have to do everything that we can to address that. That's why I like to talk about Louisiana and how we are moving forward and capitalizing on cutting edge technology and innovation. But increasingly these electric vehicles, they're not the future, they are the present. And I'm excited about that. And it's just one aspect of how we're transforming infrastructure in our state with the help of the federal government. Sean talked to you about the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. It passed Congress last year, bipartisan initiative. It's going to invest nearly $6 billion in Louisiana over the next 5 years, coming through the Department of Transportation and Development. For things like highways and bridges, public transportation, electric vehicle infrastructure, ports, and airports. And then there's going to be additional dollars that will be available to us through competitive discretionary grant programs that we are going to be applying for, and I think we're going to be very competitive for those as well. But specifically over 5 years, we're talking about $75 million for electric vehicle infrastructure. This certainly fits in with our climate action plan of reaching net zero by 2050 and becoming a competitor in the EV industry. So our goals include having 250 EV stations per 100,000 residents by 2050. Pursuing incentives that prioritize upfront grants over rebates and loans to make sure lower income households also adopt electric vehicles. And adapting to tourists. As more and more people move to electric vehicles, we want to make sure that they can charge them at restaurants, sporting venues, cultural events. Otherwise, we will miss out on visitors and they will go elsewhere where they can charge their vehicles. But electric vehicles are more than just a tool to fight climate change. And many of the vehicles that you see here this morning will spend an inordinate amount of time idling. And if they are traditional internal combustion engines, then everybody in close proximity to those vehicles is going to be breathing fumes. And so this is about cleaning up our air in ways that aren't just tied to CO2 emission reductions in order to address climate change. And so the impacts on public health will be, I think, very beneficial as well. An especially important example of how the shift to EVs can have additional community benefits beyond fighting climate change is also electrifying school buses. And that's something that we are certainly working on. And by the way, this EV initiative is being done at DOTD and at DEQ, which is why I'm happy to have the DEQ representatives here this morning. You not only have a quieter, environmentally friendly mode of transportation for students when you electrify school buses, but young kids aren't having to walk through tailpipe emissions to get on and off a bus twice a day and every day for the entire school year. Another reason why we need to diversify the fleet is for disaster response. We don't want to be depending on one type of fuel when the stakes are high after a natural disaster. And I know if you remember back in Ida, though, 50% of the refining capacity in Louisiana went offline. By the way, that was 15% of the nation's refining capacity, and we had a lot of fueling stations that just didn't have fuel, didn't have gas, didn't have diesel. So if we have a mix of vehicles in terms of the types of fuel that they use, then we're going to be able to respond much better in the wake of these natural disasters. So you can see the truth is the adoption of electric vehicles isn't about a singular issue. It's about all these things and many, many more. But in order to accomplish these goals, we have to begin to transition now. And we got to replace state vehicles across all agencies. Because if you got a goal to be at a certain place by 2030 and all the way there by 2050, you can't wait till 2029 or 2049 in order to start that transition. And I know that change can be intimidating, but in this case, I happen to think it's also very exciting. And it was an exciting opportunity for me to drive this vehicle this morning. With help from the federal government, state agencies, and local government, and the private sector, because the private sector is going to be key here. I am absolutely confident that we can become a leader in fueling renewable energy here in Louisiana. So I want to thank all of you for coming out. I want to remind you that all these cones out here represent something very serious. We need to be safety conscious, and it's not just our work zones. Last year, we had a tremendous increase in the number of accidents and fatalities across highways across the state of Louisiana. And so we need people to be safe. We need them to make sure that they are wearing their seatbelts, that they are not texting while they're driving, because distracted driving is a huge issue for us and others across the country. But in our work zones, let's slow down and make sure that our workers, whether they are DOTD workers or workers for private vendors, that they are safe. That is extremely important for us here in Louisiana as well. I want to thank Ann Vale for being with us this morning, and call her up to the podium because it is time to hear from Ann. Thank you all, and God bless.
Okay, following up after those two is no small chore, and they took most of my best lines. So what I'm going to do is just talk to you about what we're doing and what we have here today. So we have the Clean Transportation Awareness Week. We've been celebrating it all week. We've had events and a reception downtown the other night. And these vehicles, these advanced vehicles, are just a sampling of the options that are available to fleets today. And we decided to bring out some vehicles that y'all probably haven't ever seen yet. But Louisiana Clean Fuels, we're a Department of Energy designated Clean Cities Coalition. So what does that mean? We're one of 80 coalitions across the country who have been working for over 25 years with public and private fleets to advance the use of alternative fuels and reduce transportation emissions. So we've been doing this a long time. In the state of Louisiana, we have so many alternative fuel vehicles that you may not have even noticed on the road. East Baton Rouge has propane school buses. Most of our waste refuse companies have natural gas refuse trucks, and now they have the option for electric as well. The city of Lake Charles loves propane and uses them in their fleet. We have our CATS electric transit buses. Did you know we have 9 electric transit buses? It's not just the same yellow and green bus rotating all over town. There are 9 of them, and by the end of the year, I hear we may have 20 electric buses. So there's a lot of great things happening, and we're just so excited to be part of it. And one of the roles that we're going to serve at Louisiana Clean Fuels is we're going to help designate the remaining corridors to electric and hydrogen. We already have designated natural gas and propane corridors. You may not have noticed that as well. So we do have fueling stations all across the state that support fleets with their interstate travel. And the goal is to do that for hydrogen and electric as well. We're going to be helping the state develop the state plan so we know where those chargers need to go. And we're going to do it equitably and responsibly. And we're going to make sure that the communities that those chargers are installed in, that we're being considerate of the needs of the communities that we're putting them in. And we're going to have a lot of stakeholder feedback and meetings and outreach. So this is going to be a transparent process. So we are going to be inviting the community to the table to be part of this process. And that is one of the roles that we're most excited about at Louisiana Clean Fuels. So y'all enjoy all these vehicles, enjoy this beautiful day, and look us up. We're louisianacleanfuels.org. If you have a community that wants to learn more about converting your fleet, or you want to learn more about how to pull electric vehicles into your community and prepare for it, that's the role that we can serve, and we can help you. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you all for joining us. You should also appreciate and know that this is not a new initiative for Louisiana. We've been working with Louisiana Clean Fuels since I've been secretary, and it goes back to 2016, where we used some of our resources to help the Shreveport Transit Authority get an entire fleet of alternative fuel vehicles, things that will make a difference. And that's a unique situation. And so as we grow this economy and we grow these opportunities, great things can happen for our state, financially speaking, but also from an environmental standpoint. So please, as Ann said, and as the governor said, take time to visit our vendors who are here today. They are promoting their technology and their equipment. You have an opportunity to invest in these types of vehicles if you're in that business or you want to purchase that car. But more importantly, we want you to spread the message to other stakeholders and leaders that there are alternatives out there to give us better outcomes for the state of Louisiana, consistent with our climate action plan and just responsible development. The private sector is already there. It's up to us as government now to help do our part to make that happen. So we'd like to thank you all for joining us. Please feel free to enjoy the day and visit the equipment. For all of our vendors, we're going to follow Ann in front of one of these pieces of equipment, and we will take a photo with the governor and all of our vendors and we'll mingle for a little bit and learn what we can about this equipment. So thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all enjoy the day and have a beautiful rest of your Thursday.
I'm just thrilled with the amount of cooperation between the state departments and the governor's office. This administration is really working together. There's so much communication that some of my friends across the country that do exactly what we do are really kind of envious of just the cooperation and the enthusiasm in the work that we're doing.
About how you got here to the press conference today.
Well, I walked. You know, this is the governor's mansion is only about a half a block over towards the west here, and it's a beautiful morning, and decided to walk over. And then I got into an electric vehicle and drove around the front of the building. So I haven't had to use any internal combustion engine in order to move myself yet today. That'll happen shortly. But it's a beautiful day. It's great to be out here talking about electric vehicle and the charging stations, a way that we can make sure that we're doing our part as a state, both with respect to state agencies, but with the efforts by DEQ and DOTD to deploy electric vehicle charging stations so that people, whether they live here, work here, or traveling to and through Louisiana, they're going to have opportunities to charge their vehicles. Otherwise, we just can't meet our climate action plan goals, and those are incredibly important. More important for us in Louisiana than perhaps anywhere else, because the adverse effects of climate change are so much more pronounced here, and it manifests itself in a lot of serious ways. The increasing severity and frequency of storms, which we have seen with Hurricanes Laura and Delta and Ida, for example, over the last 2 years, but also sea level rise, which is threatening our coast. And all the efforts that we're making to engage in robust coastal restoration and protection are necessitated by this as well. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I'm excited about these electric vehicles and the opportunity they're going to give us to really advance our climate action plan.
Louisiana DOTD is going to be installing about $74 million worth of electric vehicle charging equipment. We've long had an alternative fuel corridor to look at hydrogen, to look at propane, to look at CNG, and to look at electric vehicles. Right now, we're going to be installing these vehicles every 50 miles on our corridors and in other locations. And today, I announced that DOTD will install a fast charge electric facility in front of our building here for the general public's use. And we're going to have some level 2 charging for employees who choose to drive these with parking spots in the back. So we're excited to see this and put our mouths where our work is. You know, we're going to not just talk about it, we're going to act on it and demonstrate it. No different than you see the bike share that's here, no different than the pedestrian facility that we've provided, a walking path, if you will, for folks on lunch or on break. And so we're going to do the same thing with electric vehicles. We're going to work with the private sector to do that, where we can convert a gas station into a fueling station, giving them the opportunity to invest in multiple types of fuel to serve different audiences. And an electric vehicle charging facility is just like your gas tank. You may lose a little energy, but you can always plug it up. That's what you do with your iPhone when you get to work or you get to a friend's house, and you get that juice and you go back home. The same thing's going to happen in our vehicle industry.
Tell us, how can people get more information?
Well, they can go to our website, they can go to Louisiana Clean Fuels, and then there's a joint office between the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy dedicated to EV charging. It's the National Electric Vehicle Institute. So it's going to be a wonderful opportunity to learn and grow and to experience this technology firsthand, both as a consumer, if you're driving a pedestrian-style vehicle, or if you're an employee working somewhere and you're going to have a fleet of vehicles, you can drive this nice school bus here or this minivan that can move folks with 11 people and 4 wheelchairs. So it's an interesting application to be more efficient, to be a little bit cleaner, to also be safe, and to be sustainable.